going down, everybody? Welcome back to another episode of Commander Ad Populum. Commander for the people, by the people, for the people. This is episode 12. I'd like to welcome you to Studio CCO, now with new soundproofing. Again, you probably can't hear the difference, but it looks nicer. Big shout out to Ginger Joe on Twitter. He sent me the full set of Modern Horizons art cards that are getting framed up. I left a specific space on the wall to hang them in between sound panels. So, Joe, big thank you to you. I'll send you a picture on Twitter as soon as I got them up. Big thank you to the official sponsors of Commander Ad Populum as well. They are FusionGamingOnline.com. They've got everything you need, including all of their sponsored content at themanabase.com. That's where you can find Commander Ad Populum, along with all of their other sponsored content, YouTube, articles, videos, and of course your boy, Ryan, at Commander Ad Populum. I got two other thank yous before we get into the community topic. The first thank you, of course, all of the patrons. Without your support, none of this would be possible. Of course, patreon.com/CADPopcast, CADPOPCAST, if you'd like to go over there. Check out what I've got going on for alters and future content planned. That's tutorial videos. I'd very much appreciate it if you went and had a look. Of course, on Twitter every week, every Thursday, to coincide with the Commander Cookout podcast, Thursday altered art auctions, I've been offering patrons of Commander Ad Populum the chance to straight up buy some of the higher end pieces that I mentioned a few weeks ago on the show. So if anybody wants to head over there, you can find me on Twitter at CADPopcast, and every Thursday you can find a couple pieces that are for sale. And they're a little, like I said, a little bit higher end than the stuff that you'll find for auction at the Commander Cookout Facebook page. 2 weeks ago was a doubling cube. There's been a Phyrexian Soul Ring. There's, I think Mirari's Wake is coming up this week, so head over, check it out. I'd very much appreciate that. And final thank you before I get into it is a big thank you going out to everybody that attended or helped out or celebrated with me at my sister's wedding. Of course, my sister Stephanie got married this last weekend. She is a patron of the show. I very much appreciate that. So Rebecca and I drove up and we helped set up the tables and the tent, and we worked with the caterers to set the tables, and she got married in my parents' yard, and it literally looks like Hobbiton where they live. It's lush and green and huge trees. There's been people living in the yard that they live in for, I'll say, almost 100 years. So everything is very lived in. It's beautiful up there. So big thank you to everybody that was there or helped or contributed. It was a ton of fun. I don't want to get into how much I drank, but it was lots. So that's a little bit what I want to talk about today, actually, is not so much planning or setting up for a wedding, but contributions to your local gaming community. I always say, or I've said in the past a few times, that it really takes a family or a village to raise a podcast or keep a podcast afloat or off the ground, right? I've told this to people on Twitter or people who've commissioned me, and I endlessly thank them, because it really does take everybody out there who's listening to make it happen. And a wedding is no different. It takes the whole family coming together, or to make it a little bit more relevant to the cast, if you are trying to start a new play group or get something off the ground at a local game store, or if you're starting a local game store. I've gone to a few events now where I meet people that want to talk to whoever it is, writers, podcasters, content creators, because they're starting a new store and they want our input on, what kind of events should I run? What kind of prizes should I give away? What would your listener, Mr. Podcaster, what would your listeners like to see if they were going to attend events in terms of tournament structure, casual, competitive, prizing, all those things, right? So it very much takes a ton of people to keep stuff like this going. And I wanted to touch on, like I said, starting a new play group. It does take some work. It takes some time and some emotional investment to, get people to come together to play. And if you've got a venue like a local game store that has table space and it's open for you to use for free, like, make a post on Facebook or talk to your friends, or, make posters and ask the local game store owner, like, can I put these up so on Thursdays or whatever we can come play, right? I'm lucky enough that I've got a couple local game stores in Saskatoon, but one of them does offer a Friday Night Magic EDH experience, I'll call it, and it runs the gambit from like pretty new players to pretty advanced players, or guys that are coming over from Modern or Draft or whatever to play some more competitive Commander. We played Plane Chase there 2 weeks ago. Like, The width and breadth of players and different types of commander is awesome. But it wasn't without its, I'm not going to call them struggles to get off the ground, but you have to go around to the few local game stores that you have access to and say, hey, can you run commander? I think people would show up. And then go back to your own kitchen table play group and say, let's go out and play at local game store XYZ, whatever they're called, right? Let's go there and show them that there is a market for this. Let's spend some money at these stores. Let's make it so it's an inviting place for people to play. I mean, a few months ago, the first time that we went to, Brando and I on Commander Cookout call it EDH&M. The first night we went, there was like 5 people. There was 4, then I showed up, and then the other guy left, so it went from 5 to 4 again. Now, routinely, there's more than 20 people. There's 3, 4, 5 games all happening at the same time. And like I said, new players, competitive players, casual, plane chase. It was all happening the last time I was there, and it was a ton of fun. And there's players that don't even play Commander that just want to come and hang out in between rounds of their draft because it's casual and inviting and fun, and that just takes a little bit of work. It takes the community coming together and agreeing that we want to go and have fun somewhere, wherever it is, too. I mean, it doesn't have to be an LGS if you don't have access to one. It could be a library or a restaurant, though you probably have to buy food at the restaurant. But again, if everybody just chips in, if there's 10 people and everybody, like you say, it's $2 to play Magic all night and you buy 2 giant plates of nachos for 10 people, like that's probably going to be a pretty good night. You're going to make the store owner or the restaurant owner happy, and you're going to have a ton of fun. And you're going to have a ton of good nachos. I pick nachos because they're my favorite food. Substitute nachos with pizza or ice cream or McDonald's or whatever. We used to play at McDonald's before Commander even was a thing, really. We used to jam on Thursday nights at Brando's house till 2 or 3 in the morning and then go to McDonald's. Then I'd get up to go to work the next day at like 5. I'm too old for that now. I'm feeling it after my sister's wedding for 3 days. 4 days if you count Thursday. But like I said, put some work into your play group or your community, or work with your local game store or whatever venue you have to foster a community. I really think that's important for the growth of the game, especially because there's so much digital now that keeps people on their butt in their house, and so much content, podcasts, YouTube. There's so much stuff that you can, different avenues that you can consume the game in now that is all just on your phone or on your TV, where the gaming actually happens out in stores or at the place that you play or at tournaments or at an event. Like Magic Fest attendance or Grand Prix attendance is down because people want to, they want to watch a stream of somebody playing a game, or they want to play MTG Arena, which is fine if you like Arena, but it doesn't help the local game stores. It doesn't help your local play group. It doesn't help the economy. And it's all of the people that you play with that really, like the podcast, help keep everything off the ground. So get out, go play somewhere, have some fun with people in real life. It really took me being at home all weekend or all half the week with my family to really realize that that's really what it's about. Like, whatever it is in your life that's worth doing and worth celebrating or worth building, just like the podcast, it really takes everybody pouring themselves into, pouring their love into, right? I sat at a table with one of my really good friends, and his wife remarked that my dad really just has so much love to give. And I think that's true of everybody in my family. Everybody just poured their love into this wedding this weekend, and it would be so awesome if everybody who is interested in growing Magic the Gathering would do that, because we would have even more game stores, more games happening, more tournaments, more community, more new players. We would have more of everything if we all focused our efforts into building a community by pouring ourselves into it. I don't know what other way to kind of say that, but that's what I wanted to talk about today. So I hope that inspires you a little bit. Maybe you go out and talk to local game store owners or engage with a new play group to try and build a community, and you can make something of it. Okay, moving on to the technical section today. It's going to be a little bit shorter, but it's going to be a little bit, I'll say, techier than the last couple weeks. So last week we did our set retrospective on Mirage. This week it's spoiler alert, it's Visions, the next set in the story. Visions and Mirage both have the ability or the mechanic, Cumulative Upkeep. Let's try it again. Cumulative Upkeep. And I want to go into the rules of that just a little bit, because some people do get it wrong, or they're not quite sure when it happens. Is it triggered? Can I pay it partially? Those kinds of things. So going into the comprehensive rules, Cumulative Upkeep, Rule 702.23. And without sounding like I'm reading a verse from the Bible or some legal jargon, I'll kind of summarize it. Cumulative Upkeep is a triggered ability, and it imposes an increased cost on a permanent. Cumulative Upkeep and then some cost. What it really means is at the beginning of your upkeep, if the permanent is on the battlefield, put an age counter on it. So that happens during your upkeep. You put an age counter on the permanent. Then you pay the cost for each age counter on the permanent. If you can't pay the combined cumulative total of the cost, then you sacrifice it. It's not destroyed. It's not exiled. You actually sacrifice it. So if you don't pay the cost of something and you have a something else that triggers when you sacrifice a permanent, it would trigger because you sacrifice the permanent you're not paying the cumulative upkeep cost on. So that's the first thing I wanted to mention. It's corner case, but most of these things are, and there's enough corner cases with cumulative upkeep that I think that we can look at them for the whole technical section. So second thing to take note of here is cumulative upkeep is a triggered ability. So at the beginning of your upkeep, the trigger would go onto the stack. So you can respond to the trigger as the active player. It goes onto the stack. You have the first chance to respond. So if you've got something that has like 2 or 3 age counters on it or whatever, or you're putting another one on it, before you put that next counter on it, so when the cumulative upkeep ability is still on the stack before you put the age counter on it, you can cast a spell, let's say a Dark Ritual. The Dark Ritual will give you 3 mana that you can then let your cumulative upkeep ability resolve and you pay 3. So that's important if you had something like a ritual in your hand and not enough mana to pay the cost. If something said cumulative upkeep, discard a card, and you had like just one instant in your hand, you could cast your one instant and then not have anything to pay the cumulative upkeep cost if you have to discard a card. If you'd have no card in your hand at that point, you would have to sacrifice your card with cumulative upkeep. So again, a corner case, but you can respond to that trigger because it does use the stack, because it is a triggered ability. Now, the next thing, because you're putting age counters at the beginning of each upkeep, when the trigger resolves to get an age counter on it, you can proliferate those age counters. And you might think like, oh, why would I want to pay more? Why would I want more age counters? I have to pay more things to my cumulative upkeep trigger. Well, there's a card, just as an example, there's a card called Herald of Leshrac. It's a 2/4 flyer for 7 mana. It gets +1/+1 for each land you control but don't own. And its cumulative upkeep cost is gain control of a land you don't control. So you cast it, the next turn you put an age counter on it and then pay the cost. Gain control of 1 land. Next turn, put a counter on it, and then gain control of 2 lands, 3 lands, 4 lands, each round of the table, and each time you gain more lands, he gets bigger and bigger. So after your first instance of doing that, and he's got 1 counter on it, if you can proliferate that counter a whole bunch, your next turn, let's say he's got 6 age counters on him, you gain control of 6 lands, so you go up 6 mana for nothing essentially, and then he gets +6/+6. So this is the kind of thing that you would want to proliferate counters onto, age counters. Now, the last thing I want to touch on for cumulative upkeep is you can't pay partial costs. You determine all the costs that are associated with this one instance of cumulative upkeep, and then you pay them all at the same time. It's not like it triggers one time for each age counter. No, it looks at the number of age counters after you've put one on, and then you pay them all. So with that Herald of Leshrac, if it's got 6 age counters on it and only 5 lands you don't control are on the battlefield, you can't gain control of all 5 of them because this particular cumulative upkeep trigger requires you to gain control of 6 lands or sacrifice it. Because you can't gain control of 6, you have to sacrifice it. It's the same thing like if you have to pay 6 mana because it's got 6 age counters on it, like your Mystic Remora has 6 age counters on it, you can't pay 5 of them and then and then sacrifice it, you have to pay 0 because you don't have 6 mana, and then you sacrifice it. So again, I think that's kind of self-explanatory, but in some corner cases, you might want to try and partially pay your cumulative upkeep cost, and you can't. You have to pay for all of it or none of it. So that's that. It's relevant because we're talking about, like back in Ice Age, we were talking about Mystic Remora and cumulative upkeep. Now we're talking about it in Mirage and Visions, and probably next week in Weatherlight. Spoiler again, sorry. So I just thought I'd mention it because some people have gotten confused or didn't quite know how it worked, or didn't know that they could respond to it because it's actually a triggered ability. So that's that. Hopefully I don't run into any cards that have cumulative upkeep in our set retrospective for Visions, because I've said it enough times, my tongue is tied up enough that hopefully I don't have to run into it anymore. So taking a look at Visions, I love this set. It has 167 cards, and of course is part of the Mirage block, and was released February 3rd, 1997. So we're into 97 by now. It took us 12 episodes to move from 1993 to 1997. 15 card booster packs. They had Teferi's puzzle box on the booster pack, and it's the weirdest art because it looks like a girl and Teferi's a dude. I'm not sure if that's supposed to be him and it's just like kind of an interpretive art. I'm not sure what's going on there, but that's that. Before we start going through individual cards, we had a cycle of charms, just like in Mirage, so that kind of continued in this set, the next set after Mirage. There's Karoo lands, and the Karoo lands, this is interesting because these set retrospectives give us an idea of how the cards or the sets influenced Commander or Magic to come. The Karoo lands are a set of 5 lands that when they enter the battlefield, you have to return an untapped basic land you control to its owner's hand. They enter the battlefield tapped, then they tap to give you a color and a colorless, and they sound an awful lot like the bounce lands from Ravnica. And a lot of people refer to the bounce lands in Ravnica as the Karoo lands, because Karoo from Visions was the first one that did this. And of course, there's Karoo is the white one, Coral Atoll is the blue one, Everglades is the black one, Dormant Volcano and Jungle Basin are the red ones and the green ones. So just like the Ravnica Karoo lands, these ones bounce a land and give you 2 mana after they come into play tapped. So this, in 1997, kicked off some of the most prolific or popular or widely used lands at the common rarity in all of Commander. And of course in Ravnica, the original Ravnica set for color fixing in Draft. So it all started in 97 with the Karoo lands in Visions. Kind of cool. So that's what I wanted to touch on. There's, again, super sick art direction because all of Mirage block, all of 97 had very much experimental art direction because, again, they were switching from in-house to contracted artists as a means to save money. So looking at individual cards in Mirage, there's no legendary creatures in Mirage, which I found was a little bit funny, but there are a ton of real super awesome Commander cards. I wanted to kick things off with a little ditty called Anvil of Bogarden. I've lost to this card before. Stuff like this that got our girl Iona banned. Remember last week? Okay, so 2 mana. So it comes down on turn 1 or 2. If you got a Soul Ring, maybe turn 1. Everybody skips their discard phase, so players have no maximum hand size. Cool, so it's kind of like a group hug card, but wait, there's more. During each player's draw step, that player draws an additional card and then chooses and discards a card. So you draw 2 at the beginning of your turn, but then you have to discard 1. So you can imagine like turn 1, Anvil of Bogarden, discarding Iona, and then turn 2, you animate dead her. And you got a turn 2 Iona, locking out a monocolored player from the rest of the table. Or for the rest of the game, on turn 2. Like before you even let your opponent lay their second island or their second swamp, you can reanimate an Iona. So I've seen that before, and I think, just going back to last week, I think that that's pretty synonymously the reason that Iona got the banhammer, because she could do stuff like that with cards like Anvil of Bogarden. That was originally in Visions. Next one I wanted to talk about. Blanket of Night is an enchantment for black 1. Each mana-producing land is a swamp in addition to its other land types. So if $20 Urborg Tomb to Yawgmoths are too much money and you have a black-based enchantment deck or whatever, you could get a 32-cent Blanket of Night. Just going to throw that right out there. I got another one for Nekuzar players. Breath Stealer's Crypt. It's an enchantment it's 4 mana, blue, black, 2. Whenever any player draws a card, he or she reveals that card. If the card is a creature, that player pays 3 life or discards the card. So everything's being revealed as everybody draws, and Nekuzar decks don't run a ton of creatures, so they never really have to pay 3 life or discard the card. And people that are playing more traditional creature attacking decks or aggro decks are going to have to discard or pay 3 life a whole ton of times. So you just cast like a Wheel of Fortune or like a Windfall with 10 cards in your hand, and people are going to have to discard 10 cards after they draw. And if you've got like Megrim or Liliana's Caress in addition to your Nekuzar out, it's a cool card. City in a Bottle I really like. Another enchantment. Have we done enchantments and artifacts? Hey, that seems to be a thing. Each player can only cast spells and activate abilities on their own turn. City of Solitude, sorry. Got Chronotog, that's another one. This was like a famous Stacks lock piece. It's a 2/1 for blue 1. Skip your next turn. Chronotog gets +3/+3 until end of turn, but you can only use that ability one time. If you pair it with Stasis, which says you don't get to untap anything, players don't untap anything, you can just skip your next turn so you never have to pay the upkeep cost on Stasis, and nobody can ever untap anything. You just skip your turn all the time with Chronotog, and then you just deck them all. And they're locked under Stasis, not being able to untap. And of course, you would play that lock with, all of your blue mana open, or Force of Will, or Pact of Negation, so you have ways to counterspell anything if they have untapped mana that can destroy your enchantment. Just counterspell their naturalized, and then they're tapped out, and then they have to mill. During their draw, right? Like, you skip your turn, they don't skip their turns, they can't untap or play anything. Eventually, they'll just die. Now that I'm going through the list, I'm looking at another enchantment, go figure, Desolation. Desolation was part of a cycle that did like color hosing for the opposite colors on the color wheel. So Desolation was at the beginning of each end step, each player who tapped a land for mana, this turn sacrifices the land. Okay, so how does that color hose? Okay, Desolation deals 2 damage to each player who sacrifices a plains this way. So there's red cards that do that just say destroy a land if you tapped it for not during your turn. Desolation does it in black, and it additionally hoses white players. Going back to the Karoo lands, I'm seeing the actual the card frame for Dormant and Volcano now, and it's got that red text box. Visions was the first set that did that. Just as a aesthetic thing, it only produces red mana, red and colorless, so they gave it a red text box treatment. They still do that today for cards that produce just red or just green, or there's a certain color for multicolored card, a certain color text box for lands that produce multiple colors. So that started in Visions, just as a little tip of the hat, I guess. Going down the list some more, I'm seeing Fire Blast. This isn't really an EDH card unless you wanted to run maybe an all burn deck just to see if it could happen, right? It's red 4 to deal 4 damage to any target, but you could, instead of paying the 6, you could just sacrifice 2 mountains. Maybe if you can get those mountains back, it's like a free burn spell. Maybe like Lord Windgrace decks might want that or something like that. I don't know. Here's a real card, Goblin Recruiter. So this is a 1/1 for red 1, Goblin of course. When it enters the battlefield, search your library for any number of Goblin cards, reveal them, put them on top of your library. That is a pretty sick card when you can get like Goblin Ringleader. You play your Goblin Ringleader, and then you reveal the top 4 cards of your library, every Goblin you get. So it's like you put your Goblin Ringleader on top with 3 other maybe combo Goblin cards stacked beneath them. You Goblin Ringleader and then just draw 3 Goblins or draw 4 Goblins. So that's really cool. Alphabetically, this is the card I mentioned last week when I'm looking for a Visions misprint for my Mistform Ultimus deck. There's a card called Griffin Canyon. This goes with the Griffin legendary creature from Mirage last week. It's a land, it taps for colorless, or you can tap it to untap target Griffin. That Griffin gets +1/+1 until end of turn. So it gives a Griffin pseudo-vigilance and buffs him for a turn. If anybody's got a Dark Visions misprint of this card, I want it. Maybe we can hook up on Twitter, or we can hook up at Magic Fest Vegas. If anybody's going, bring your Dark Visions Griffin Canyon misprint. Next one I want to talk about, we got Helm of Awakening. All spells cost 1 mana less. So this could be a group hug card, or it could be used as a means to combo with Future Sight and Sensei's Divining Top to draw your whole deck and infinite storm count, and sure, that's a great card. I play it in my storm deck, but whenever you see that card, I don't know, usually Usually destroy on sight because somebody's not using it fairly, because it makes spells free, right? A couple more I wanted to talk about. We've got Mana O War. So this is a 2/2 for 3. When it enters a battlefield, return target creature to its owner's hand. Visions was the first set that saw a really high number of enter the battlefield or ETB effects on creatures. 1/8/7 effects they're called when they destroy another creature. So I'm thinking like Mana War, Necrotal, Uktabi orangutans, they all did something. Mana War bounced a creature. Necrotal destroyed target non-black, non-artifact creature. It was like a terror on a creature. And then Uktabi orangutan destroyed an artifact. So they all did something when they entered the battlefield. So it made bouncing them very good, or it made blocking with them or chump blocking with them really profitable because you already got an effect out of them, right? Like standard Magic stuff that we think about today, but like 21 years ago, this was new tech, and you could use your Mana War to bounce itself if you needed that for some reason. Like if something triggered when a creature entered the battlefield for you, you could play the Mana War, bounce itself, and then you could play it again and bounce something else. That's popular in Commander now, or like in combo decks. My Animar deck plays Mana War because it can bounce itself infinitely with a card called Earthcraft. So look that up, I guess. A couple more here I wanted to talk about. Necromancy was the next kind of evolution in the long line of really powerful reanimation spells. This one costs 3 mana, but you can do it at instant speed. You can cast it as an instant, but then you have to sacrifice it at end of turn. So if you reanimate at instant speed, the creature that you reanimated like gets exiled at the end of turn. So super cool. Natural Order is another one. This is sack a green creature to search your library for a green creature, put it onto the battlefield. This was the cornerstone of a ton of legacy decks for years and years and years. This is one of the most powerful cards in the set. If you can get your hands on a Natural Order, this card wins games. Lots of times it would go like, Natural Order, sacrifice my Llanowar Elf or whatever on turn 2 or 3, find a Progenitus, because he's green. That was a Natural Order Progenitus was like a legacy deck like 10 years ago. It was awesome. I want to talk about a little card originally printed in Visions. It's been reprinted a couple times since, but it's called Righteous Aura. It's an enchantment for white 1. You could pay white and 2 life, prevent all damage to you from any one source. So if you've got somebody like I have in your local meta like Brando that just wants to kill everybody with a Comet Storm, he Comet Storms, he multi-kicks it maybe like 3 ways and deals 20 damage to each person. Well, I'll just Righteous Aura. I mean, of course he wouldn't do that in that circumstance because Righteous Aura is on the battlefield, but it's great for stopping like attackers with trample or flyers that you can't block. You just pay 2 life and a white to essentially fog that creature. Super cool card. Next card, Rowan, enchantment again for 4 mana during your draw phase. So when you draw, reveal the first card you draw to all players. If that card is a basic land, draw another card. What? It's another in the line of green gets to draw more cards per turn, like Sylvan Library from Legends. Speaking of green gets to do broken stuff, how about Squandered Resources? Another enchantment, green, black, sack a land, add to your mana pool any type that land could produce. So essentially you tap out for all of the mana you can produce, then you sacrifice all those land. Essentially it's a land doubler when you try to win the game. Super awesome card. Summerbloom, another one. I think this is banned in Modern actually. Sorcery, green 1, play 3 additional lands this turn. So it pays for itself if you have more than 2 land in hand. Could you just drop 3 more land? It's awesome. That's a great card. If you've got ways to reuse it or get it out of your graveyard with like regrowth effects or whatever, you say you draw a bunch of cards, Summerbloom, play 3 extra lands, regrowth with those 3 lands, Summerbloom again, 3 more lands. Yeah, it's pretty powerful magic. Last couple I want to talk about. Teferi's Puzzle Box, of course. This is on the booster pack. It's an artifact for 4 mana. During each player's draw phase, that player counts the cards in their hand, puts those on the bottom, then draws that many cards. So this again goes in Nekizar decks or Arjun the Shifting Flame type decks, where everybody just wants to cycle through their library like crazy. I gotta speed it up so I'm not over for time here. Tithe is white. I'll call it mana ramp. I'm going to call it that. Triangle of War. That's a bad card, but essentially it's the symbol on Visions, the little triangle with the V. That's Triangle of War, FYI. Last 2. A personal one and a really good one. The personal one, the card called Warthog. Just because it's my little guy's like second favorite card. Shout out to Stalking Tiger last week and Warthog this week. We're building a whole zoo. And it's done strictly from Mirage cards so far. Mirage block. Last card, just like last week's last cards were the powerful tutors in the set, I want to take a look at Vampiric Tutor. This one is an instant for 1 black, pay 2 life, search your library for any 1 card, shuffle your library, then put that card back on top of it. Oh, that is one of the best tutors in all of Magic because it's 1 mana to find you anything you want at instant speed. So you could do it at the end of the player to your right's turn to immediately draw the card on your turn. Or if you have some way to draw it into your hand during your turn when you cast it, you just get whatever card you want out of your deck at the cost of 1 mana and casting the Vampiric Tutor. Super powerful, cool picture. I think it's been reprinted as like a Judge promo. It's really expensive, so if you can't afford it, I mean, it's fine. But I wanted to mention it because it is great in black decks. Cornerstone in black decks is their ability to tutor, right? There's so many affordable tutors in black. Affordable mana-wise, they're all expensive. But that's Visions. Tell me what you think on Twitter at CADPopcast, or search me up on Facebook. You can comment on the episode 12 post on the Facebook page, facebook.com/CADPopcast. You can find me there. Of course, if you wanted to become a patron, you're going to unlock future altered art tutorial content, or personally, you could unlock discounted altered art pieces or discounts on shipping, whatever benefit you sign up for. Of course, you'll unlock that for yourself, and I would greatly appreciate that. Giant thank you to all the patrons, all the friends and family that do make this whole endeavor of mine possible. I really couldn't do it without you. Giant thank you to FusionGamingOnline.com. Of course, they are the sponsor for all of your Visions needs, or any Magic the Gathering or gaming related need in general, I guess. It's awesome working with them. If anybody wants to hit me up with a Dark Visions misprinted Griffin Canyon, same social media coordinates. If you want to bring one to Vegas and trade me in person, I would very much appreciate that. Or if you just want to hook up and hang out in Vegas, we're going to be there. I'm going to get there with Brando on August 21st. That's the Wednesday in the afternoon. And we've got some different content planned with different creators, both for Commander Cookout and Commander Ad Populum. So of course, come find me, come hang out, shoot me a message if you're there or going to be there. We'll meet up, we'll jam some games. Until then, thank you again, everybody. I'll see you next Wednesday.